Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: Treasury Secretary Bessent leading round 3 of U.S. China trade talks in the Swedish capital. When asked if he trusts China, he says he trusts President Trump. Just before U.S. China trade talks kick off, Commerce Secretary Lutnick is weighing in on TikTok. He says President Trump likes the Chinese-owned social media app, but it needs to land in trusted U.S. hands. The world's 2 biggest economies, the United States and the European Union, struck a trade deal over the weekend. It's putting pressure on China just as U.S. China trade talks kicked off Monday.
This is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
And what would it look like if China invaded Taiwan? A new Taiwanese TV series is imagining exactly that, and it's earning rave reviews from viewers. U.S. and Chinese officials are meeting Monday to further ease trade tensions. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier He are leading the delegations through Tuesday in Stockholm, Sweden, their 3rd meeting in less than 3 months. The 2-day trade talks will take place behind closed doors. On the agenda, how long the current tariff truce can hold, and key issues like U.S. sanctions related to fentanyl trafficking and China's purchases of sanctioned Russian and Iranian oil. Before heading to Stockholm, Secretary Bessent told reporters the 3rd round of talks will focus on opening up China's markets. When pressed on whether he trusts China to honor any deal, Bessent didn't answer directly. Instead, he expressed full confidence in President Trump.
I am confident that they will live up to a deal when Donald Trump is president. So during President Trump's first term, there were substantial purchase agreements for 2020, especially in ag. They made all their purchase agreements as planned on time. When President Trump left office, they just walked away from the agreements.
The U.S. and China have launched the 3rd round of meetings, coming hot on the heels of a landmark trade agreement signed Sunday between the U.S. and the European Union. Together, they account for roughly 30% of global trade. Analysts say the U.S.-EU deal could cast a long shadow over the U.S.-China trade negotiations. According to multiple media reports, Washington and Beijing are set to extend their tariff truce by 3 months beyond the August 12th deadline. Currently, the U.S. imposes 50% tariffs on Chinese exports. China levies 10% on U.S. goods. Last year, the U.S. trade deficit with China reached $295 billion. In April, President Trump said he wouldn't make a deal with China unless that trade deficit is solved. And here's an update on the ongoing saga around the Chinese-owned app TikTok. Commerce Secretary Lutnick said Sunday on Fox News that President Trump likes the social media app, but it has to move to U.S. ownership. Take a look.
And the president really likes TikTok, and he said it over and over again because, you know, it was a good way to communicate with young people. But let's face it, you can't have the Chinese have an app on 100 million American phones. That is just not okay. So it's got to move to American ownership. It's got to move to American technology, American algorithms.
Last week, Lutnick warned that TikTok will have to stop operating in the U.S. if China doesn't approve a deal for its sale. President Trump last month extended the deadline for China-based ByteDance to sell TikTok by September 17th. Over the weekend, the U.S. and the European Union struck the world's biggest trade deal. With that done, President Donald Trump is now turning his attention back to China. Here's more.
In an announcement from his golf resort in Scotland, President Trump declared the end of a transatlantic tariff standoff.
So we have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody. This is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
The agreement imposes a 15% tariff on most EU goods, down from Trump's earlier proposal of 30%, and it sets up major European investment in the United States. Under the deal, the EU has committed to purchase $750 billion in American energy and invest $600 billion more in the U.S. economy. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke alongside Trump on the significance of the agreement.
We have a trade deal between the 2 largest economies in the world. And it's a big deal, it's a huge deal. It will bring stability, it will bring predictability. That's very important for our businesses on both sides of the Atlantic.
Trump emphasized that the deal would open up European markets to U.S. companies, especially automakers and farmers, sectors he says were effectively shut out.
I think maybe cars would be the one that would go the biggest, and the second would be agriculture, the farmers.
But not everything made it into the deal. The U.S. will keep in place a 50% tariff on steel and aluminum, and the deal leaves many questions open, including tariff rates on hard liquor, a contentious topic for both parties. The deal narrowly avoided an escalation that could have seen EU and U.S. tariffs spike dramatically next week, but officials on both sides caution that more negotiations lie ahead.
We were very clear that there were tariffs that could not be lowered. So that was clear from the very beginning, and therefore we maintain them, and this shows that we have to go in depth with other topics within the framework that I've described to sort out really the details in the next days and weeks.
European Union countries are now considering whether to approve the framework that Trump and von der Leyen unveiled yesterday.
A new Taiwanese television series imagining the run-up to a Chinese invasion is getting rave reviews from viewers. Here's what the audience is saying.
A TV show confronting the fear of a war with China is giving viewers in Taiwan a wake-up call as Beijing steps up military threats around the democratically governed island. The new drama Zero Day Attack previewed in Taipei last week. The 10-episode series focuses on scenarios Taiwan might face in the lead-up to a Chinese attack. That includes a global financial collapse, activation of Chinese sleeper agents, and panicked residents trying to flee the island. Attendees at viewings in Taipei last week included the top U.S. diplomat in Taiwan, Raymond Green, who is the director of the American Institute in Taiwan, and Taiwanese tycoon Robert Tsao, a strident critic of Beijing. Some who watched the first episode gave it their approval.
That the series is close to reality is exactly why it should be filmed. Because if you avoid talking about these issues, it doesn't mean that it will not happen. Presenting such a situation of conflict can lead to more discussion about what we should do if it really turns into reality one day.
China considers democratic Taiwan as part of its own territory and calls its president a separatist. Taiwan's government disputes China's claim. In recent years, China has escalated its military drills in the area, including at least 6 rounds of major war games in the past 5 years, and daily military activities close to Taiwan. For years, the premise of zero-day attack was a topic that was thought too sensitive for many Taiwanese filmmakers and television show creators, many of whom feared losing access to the lucrative Chinese entertainment market. More than half of the show's crew asked to remain anonymous on the crew list, and some, including a director, pulled out of the production at the last minute. The series is set to premiere in Taiwan on August 2nd and will be followed by streaming in Japan and in other countries.
Moving on to China, Beijing and surrounding areas have been hit by heavy rain and flooding, prompting the highest level flood warnings. The downpour has lasted for days. At the same time, many residents are frustrated by lack of transparency from state media. Heavy rainfall caused flash flooding in a suburban area of the capital city. Authorities say at least 4 people have died in the flooding. It's important to note that China has a history of underreporting disaster data to protect the regime's public image and maintain social stability. Local reports say water reservoir discharges worsened the flooding, damaging roads and bridges. Some residents also face difficulties uploading videos of the flood to social media. This video shows a muddy river next to a highway, with water levels rising above the road surface. Traffic and communications were temporarily cut off and crop fields submerged. State broadcaster reported that over 4,400 people have been evacuated. Some returned home Monday only to find severe damage to their houses and belongings, leaving many desperate. These storms are part of a broader pattern of extreme weather. They are driven by the East Asian monsoon, which has caused disruptions in China, impacting the world's second largest economy. Coming up, a recall vote in Taiwan aiming to counter Communist China's influence failed. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te urged everyone to respect and accept the outcome.
Democracy and freedom are so precious. Their values are so precious. Freedom, human rights, and rule of law. But if Chinese communists arrive here, we will lose all of these.
China is quietly waging war on the U.S. without firing a shot. American thought leaders host Kellick is sitting down with General Michael Flynn to reveal the full story.
It's about undermining and basically physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually killing the United States of America, and doing it in such a damaging way. When you think about fentanyl, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Americans that are killed in action on the battlefields, on the streets of America.
And President Marcos urging global investors to partner up. We take a closer look at how this message relates to U.S. support.
The Philippines is a friend to all.
That and more in just a minute here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. In Taiwan, a recall vote targeting nearly half the opposition party's legislators took place over the weekend, but it failed to pass. President Lai Ching-te called on everyone to respect the results. Here's what happened.
On Saturday, Taiwan held an unprecedented vote to recall 24 opposition legislators. In the end, every one of them, members of Kuomintang Party, retained their seats.
The election result is a blow to President Lai Ching-te's Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, which has missed an opportunity to reshape the Taiwan legislature and regain its majority. While Lai won last year's presidential election, the DPP lost its legislative majority. Lai said in a statement that everyone should respect and accept the outcome of the vote, adding, "I also hope that, regardless of political affiliation or position, all parties and sectors of society will continue to safeguard our democratic and constitutional system and defend our nation." The groups pushing for the recall call it an anti-communist movement. They accuse the opposition party, KMT, of selling out Taiwan by sending lawmakers to China, blocking defense spending, and disrupting parliament. The KMT says the recalls are malicious and disrespect the results of last year's election.
The opposition party has faced criticism for its closer ties with Beijing, a stark contrast to the stance of the ruling party, the DPP. Let's zoom in.
The Saturday result left many Taiwanese people disappointed.
Democracy and freedom are so precious. Their values are so precious. Freedom, human rights, and rule of law. But if Chinese communists arrive here, we will lose all of these.
But some still remain hopeful.
This defeat is not the end. It is the beginning of another big thing. Although I don't know what this next big thing will be, we shall not be frustrated at this moment.
Another 7 lawmakers from the opposition party will face a similar vote on August 23rd.
How far back does China's influence campaign in the U.S. go? Experts say it goes further than you might think, tracing back decades to a quiet, strategic push that began under the Clinton administration. The focus, education, and getting into America's top universities. Here's the host of American Thought Leaders, Kellick, breaking it all down with retired General Michael Flynn, former National Security Advisor to President Trump.
So during the Clinton administration, one of the things that they allowed, particularly in the second term of Bill Clinton, was they allowed the Chinese government to begin to send a large number of students to colleges and universities, and they also had massive spying operations. So this began in the second half of the 90s, and all it has done is it's grown and grown and grown in time. So what the Chinese decided to do is they began to really work hard on taking over the United States of America in a very sort of subverted way, in a very quiet, covert way. So all ties into 2016 and 2017 and your question about this famous conversation I had with the Russian ambassador, which amounted to nothing, right? They knew, and you can go back and look at, a lot of other things that I've said over time or I've written about, and I've been writing about things for a long time, about this issue, about the rise of communism in the United States of America. What drives me is this country, and that's where Trump and I connected. If there's one thing that we both firmly believe in, it's the greatness of America.
From fentanyl to biowarfare, Flynn says China's strategy is extensive, all aimed at weakening America from the inside. And with tensions rising, he warns the stakes are just as high on the global stage. Flynn was asked whether President Trump could pull off a bold geopolitical move, breaking up China's alliance with Russia.
So the Chinese were very smart about who they were going to work with. And they began to work with the drug cartels because, one, it's a lot of money, but that's less of it for them. You know, the money is an element of it, but it's about undermining and basically physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually killing the United States of America, and doing it in such a damaging way. When you think about fentanyl, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Americans that are killed in action on the battlefields, on the streets of America. You know, never mind the wounded in action, right? To use military terms.
And that's the unrestricted battlefield from the Chinese perspective, which is everything.
Yeah. One of the things that we know recently, but it doesn't get a lot of coverage in the mainstream media, is the use of biological warfare against our farming industry. Okay, bringing in biological components to damage or destroy, in some cases, entire components of our agricultural industries, okay, of our farming capabilities. Never mind making sure that you have people in here that know how to do electronics, that know how to, you know, they come in and now they're citizens. Now they're citizens of this country working directly for the Chinese government. Some of them are in our government. Some of them are actually in our government.
So 2 quick questions just as we actually finish up. One is, do you think President Trump, given the difficult realities, frankly, could be able to pull off a reverse Kissinger and pull Russia out of this deep, no limits, as it's called, alliance with the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, I do believe that. I do believe that Trump has the potential and the capability and the intellect to do it. I do know that if he doesn't, the Russian leadership is desperately afraid of China taking over Russia. And east of the people that want to study geography, you know, if you look at the Ural Mountains, east of the Ural Mountains is an extraordinary amount of resources, and the Chinese want it. And the Chinese right now, as I sit here with you, they are working to take over a lot of those resources. So Trump can do it. If there's one person that can do it, he can pull Russia out of that orbit. If we don't, then we have an alliance that's much more dangerous for the existence of the United States of America. And there are people in our government that want that. They want that tension. And we can't have.
To watch the full episode, visit American Thought Leaders with Yanya Kellick on the Epic Times. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. doubled down on his foreign policy Monday, calling his country, quote, a friend to all. That was during his 4th State of the Nation address on Monday. Marcos says the Philippines is ready to build stronger ties, especially with investors looking to step in. Here's his message to all nations looking to grow ties with the Philippines.
Then as now, our foreign policy remains the same. The Philippines is a friend to all. The Philippines is an enemy to none.
Marcos told lawmakers his administration has made progress building partnerships with countries that align with the Philippines' national interests. He also addressed the economy, encouraging more businesses to invest in the country. Back in 2023, Marcos traveled to countries like the U.S., the U.K., Japan, and other neighbors in Asia to strengthen bilateral relations. Those trips led to about $71 billion in investment dollars for the Philippines, with the potential to create 175,000 jobs. A major highlight is the Philippines' defense partnership with the U.S., which established the first ever bilateral defense guidelines to modernize their military alliance. On top of that, the U.S. agreed to provide support to the Philippines in defending its territory and rights in the South China Sea. On Monday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio condemned Hong Kong's latest warrants and bounties, targeting 15 more pro-democracy activists, some of whom are living right here in the U.S. Here's the story.
Secretary Rubio said in a statement, quote, the extraterritorial targeting of Hong Kongers who are exercising their fundamental freedoms is a form of transnational repression. We will not tolerate the Hong Kong government's attempts to apply its national security laws to silence or intimidate Americans or anyone on U.S. soil. A total of 19 arrest warrants were issued for overseas democracy activists on Friday, which includes 4 individuals already wanted by Hong Kong authorities. They are accused of subversion under a draconian national security law, which is used to stifle dissent.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For On the Clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.